In the name of God, source of all being, incarnate word, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Friends, we're in week 4 of 5. Second to last week of John 6. Sixth chapter from the Gospel of John. In this lectionary year, the cycle of readings that our church follows, it is the infamous summer of John 6, the bread of life. We have been, week by week, working our way through the entire chapter of John 6, which began with the miraculous feeding of the 5,000 in the wilderness. Rather than going to Jerusalem for the Passover, crowds upon crowds of people followed Jesus into the wilderness to feed on this miraculous bread from heaven. And in the course of the events that followed that miracle, some teachings have come forth from Jesus. We're in the little section of the passage in which scholars believe that John is clearly talking about the Eucharist. The Eucharist is that meal that we practice week by week, which happens right behind me at this altar. It's the meal that we Christians believe sustains us in this lifetime. It's known by different names and different traditions. Many believe that the pinnacle of it stems from the Last Supper, the meal that Jesus shared with his friends in the upper room on the day before he was handed over to be crucified and died. John does not record that passage. John does not tell us of when they gathered in the upper room and broke the bread and shared the wine. Instead, John gives us this miracle of feeding, followed by phrases upon phrases in which Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." And here he brings up blood specifically. "Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood will have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink." The Eucharist is one of the most important and foundational and mysterious and confusing aspects of Christian life. People have been reflecting on it and writing about it since the time that Jesus broke bread in the upper room with his friends. One sermon cannot do it justice, but here are a few reflections on the journey I have had with the Eucharist and how different churches approach it in different ways, and how we in the Episcopal Church approach it, and how we as a community of St. Margaret's think of it too. Different traditions teach different things, and I think about my childhood. I happen to have been raised Roman Catholic, and Roman Catholics take the communion, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist very seriously. It's the pinnacle of the service, more important than the sermon. It's what everything leads up to. And so everything in the service is designed to bring you forward into the momentum of that moment when the bread is broken and the wine is shared. And because Roman Catholics have what we call a high theology of the Eucharist, there were rules that I remember I had to practice. I wasn't allowed to eat or drink anything except for water an hour before we got in the car and went to Mass. If you had any sins that had not yet been confessed, you should not receive. That was a kind of self-policed thing. Venial sins were okay, but mortal sins, no, you should not receive. Another key thing I remember about my childhood is that unlike in our church here at the Episcopal Church, there were rules about who may and may not receive. The belief that Christ is truly and literally present in the bread and wine is a theology that was developed in the Middle Ages, and one that was very much alive as I was taught as a child. It was later in life that I came to understand that my cousins who were Baptist did this communion thing, but they did it in a different way. And so I learned that traditions, unlike the Roman Catholic Church, approached what we call a Reformed point of view, a more Protestant point of view. So one of the key distinctions across the traditions is these two sides, speaking in huge generalities, of course. The side where Christ is truly present, there's a change. The bread and the wine literally are transformed into the body and blood of Christ. And a line of thinking that says, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. We choose to practice this ritual, but we do it because it's a memorial. The bread and the wine are symbols of Christ's presence. But these technicalities and philosophical reflections about how that change occurs are not important to us. This stemmed from, of course, the Reformation that happened in Europe in the 1600s and continued through to the English Reformation that happened later. Is it the full presence of Christ? Is it a memorial? The Anglican tradition says, yes, it's both. Right? Anglicans love to have it both ways. We love to make room in this big tent where all are welcome. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, during the English Reformation, is the author of the first Book of Common Prayer. And he intentionally wrote the prayer that we use when we make the Eucharist, which is called the Eucharistic prayer or the Great Thanksgiving. He wrote a version of the prayer that intentionally made space for the Catholic wing of the English Church and the Protestant wing of the English Church. If you know your English history, you know that that was a big deal, right? The warring with the Catholics and the Protestants. And so Cranmer was trying to come up with a solution that would keep the church united, that would keep people together. And so he wrote into the texts of the Eucharistic prayer a place where if you believe that Christ is truly present and that a change is occurring, you can identify the text and say, yes, this is right. And if you believe that that is ridiculous and that this is just a memorial and it's a symbol, you can find text in the prayer that says, yes, this represents what I believe. And so it was this great middle way where Anglicans say, yes, it's both. Let us choose for ourselves how we think of this sacred meal. There's a few other aspects I want to mention, which are distinct both to the Anglican tradition and the tradition of this parish, St. Margaret's, which is that for us, it's communal. We think about the priest's role of why Diana or I stand behind the altar and lead the prayers that are spoken during the Eucharist. It's not because we have magic powers. It's not because the priest's hands are somehow more holier than a layperson's hands. It's simply our role. And depending on how that is practiced, it can convey a certain message. And so a great example is during this COVID-19 pandemic, when we were all forced by the public health crisis to close our physical doors, and we figured out how to worship online. We stopped praying the Eucharist together as a community for many, many months. Instead, we prayed morning prayer. And I was a rector who decided that I would rather be at home, both for my and my family's safety, and in solidarity with everyone else to have the exact same experience. So I didn't feel that for St. Margaret's, it was appropriate for me to come to the church by myself, perhaps with Miranda and a camera, and say the Eucharist when no one would be able to receive. The reason is that in the Episcopal Church, we believe that the Eucharist becomes what it is because of all of us. We say the prayers together. There's no tradition in our church of when a priest on a daily basis goes off to a corner by himself and prays the Eucharist. It doesn't count, in other words, unless it's done in community and there are a group present whose prayers, with the prayers that are just spoken out loud by the priest, make the Eucharist what it is. And that is why we invoke the Holy Spirit we ask the Holy Spirit to come upon us and on the gifts of the bread and wine. It's not the priest that does it, it's God. It's the Holy Spirit. The communal aspect is one of the many reasons that some of us come forward and receive the bread. For now, not the wine, but receive the bread. We may not know what we truly believe is happening or why we're doing this, but we know that we want to belong to this community, and that simply the practice of coming forward makes us a part of this shared bread that at the same time is being shared by countless churches across the country and around the world, that for millennia has been practiced in the exact same way over the course of history. Which leads me to a final point, which is that theologians say that when we practice this sacred meal, we are anticipating and acting out a glimpse of what that heavenly banquet will be like. And the final consummation of our faith is ushered in. And the world as we know it ceases to exist because God chooses to complete a mission that was begun and ended in Jesus Christ. When all from different tribes, nations, languages, and peoples come to the table together in that heavenly place. When we do this as a community, we're saying this is what that will look like. This somehow is that, temporarily, but for a moment. And that's why we seek to participate in it week after week. They invite you to reflect. What does it mean for you? This bread of life, this cup of salvation. If you're joining us on Zoom, praying the prayer for spiritual communion allows us to acknowledge our desire to receive Jesus, but our inability to do so on this particular day. What does it mean for you? What brings you to this space? And if you're not someone who comes on a regular basis, what might help you feel called to do so? How can we journey with you in coming forward and taking that step in love of receiving this life-giving bread? Amen.